Yo, yo, yo. Hello, hello, hello. What's up, dude? Me and my roommate kind of fixed my septic tank today, so that was pretty sick. I think it's called like an aerating system, so it takes a solid waste, basically turns it into like almost water and then sends it out on the lawn in like a drip irrigation system. So first time really, man, living in a house with a septic tank, and it is a learning curve, brother. And it's been a bit expensive, kind of learning about it, because they can be pretty expensive every time you pump them, dude. It's like got me thinking, man, I'd like to get into the poop business, you know? There's some money to be made there, I think. But anyway, dude, I just got the app Libby, got a local library card, and it's pretty cool. You can get like iBooks, Kindle books on your phone for free. I think that libraries are a dope institution that we should totally support. So, man, I was always a big fan of Anthony Bourdain. Always kind of loved his way of communicating in detail, his way with words, and of course, being somebody that's interested in travel myself. Always loved Anthony's shows. Of course, I had read the classic Kitchen Confidential before, but I've never read this one, Medium Raw, a Bloody Valentine to the World of Food and the People Who Cook. Um, First off, what I want to say about Bourdain lately, man, is regarding kind of the demonization of like mental health. I heard Grant Cardone, the famous billionaire that has like a lot of influence, I would say, on young men like taking shots at Anthony Bourdain. He was saying like Bourdain is not someone I'd like to study, which is like years after Bourdain passed away. So I do think it's like pretty lame to insult somebody who's passed on like that, especially if they weren't, a bad person. Personally, I think Bourdain's life was a great success, even though he left us on his own volition. I think he opened Americans' eyes to the wider world in a major way. So to me, I see his life as a great success, even though he was not with us forever. I think probably Bourdain likely, and I'm speculating here, dude, never met him before, and I don't know what was going on in his head, but I think he probably had trouble finding people to relate to, especially in the US. Yeah, I've been to 18 countries myself, been lucky enough to visit those places, and I think it's like 5 or 10% of the population, maybe 5% of the U.S. population that's like traveled that widely. And obviously, I think Bourdain had been to a lot more places than that. So he had left his bubble many different times. Obviously, he was still living within a bit of a privileged bubble to even be able to travel, right? But I think he actively tried to shift his perspective and like break his view on the world so many times, and it was probably likely hard to find people that could really communicate with him on that level, right? And I think that sometimes those existential questions, when someone's having a bit of an existential crisis, um, whether they're depressed around those things, like the more complex the existential crisis, the more challenging it is to find someone that can help you reframe that, man. So I have ultimate empathy, dude, for Bourdain. Super, super grateful for him, and obviously he lives on through his life's work. Um, But it also had me thinking, man. I think um, sometimes within like the um, certain influencers, I guess you could categorize it as like the manosphere or something like that. They talk down on like um, people that like take their own life or something like that, or speak negatively about depression. And the thing is, dude, like calling somebody like a pussy for like having depression or something like that, or like, God forbid, like taking their life, like that's not going to help somebody, in my experience, who's like experiencing like challenging mental health stuff, dude. And you never really know like what's going on in someone's life or their head. So like to speak in generalities and blanket statements like that is like pretty whack, dude. Honestly, it's like, yes, dude, mental toughness, building up mental toughness and working on yourself and like not being a victim is dope. But we don't like talking shit on people for having negative thoughts is not going to get them any closer to being in a place of getting better, brother. You know? Like maybe we should be like directing the people that are struggling with that stuff, like to like professionals that can guide them with cognitive behavioral therapy, man, and like encourage them to like spend time around people that uplift them and stuff like that, brother. And like do self-care, cuz like if they can start to work on those things, brother, like they'll start looking at the world possibly in a more positive way, my man. So yeah, bro. I think that there's like a lot of people dispensing advice regarding mental health out there that is sometimes negative. And I do think it's good to, hear about like mental health stuff from people that are outside of the pharmaceutical or what's it called? Like professional therapist space. Yeah, I think some of that should be integrated, right? A lot of people out here genuinely do want to help their fellow person, because like if they've got a hack that they figured out, right? They shouldn't have some sort of like degree and stuff like that, like to be able to tell you what helped them, right? As long as they're speaking from a place of, hey, this helped me, this might help you. But yeah, dude, when you get into the zone where I feel like Grant Cardone was, saying that Bourdain was like not someone to be studied because he ended up taking his own life, unfortunately, I was like, that's fucking whack, lame-o energy, dude. And honestly, man, like I think in some ways, bro, like some Grant Cardone like charged me up in my early 20s, but now I definitely see a lot of glaring character flaws in that guy. I think after Trump won the presidency the second time, he said like he was gonna donate his private jet to all the little bitches that voted for Kamala, and he was going to call it Don't Be a Bitch Airlines or something along that lines. I was like, man, that's so cold and ruthless, bro. Like a leader does not say that kind of stuff. And I'm sure he's selling some kind of course on leadership, bro. And obviously I'm kind of skeptical of Scientology too. I think it's a pyramid scheme masquerading as a religion, but just my opinion. I'm not saying that's a fact. So who knows? I've heard those Scientology people can kind of come after you. But anyway, brother, little bit all over the place today, my man. Yeah, man, I think like perhaps I'll leave it at that. I'll tell you what, brother, it is kind of wild, because like some of my videos, like I've been getting like just started to get like comments and views, and like they seem like they're like on the spectrum of either like just straight love and it feels good, and then like some of them are just like pure like hate, like fuck this guy, I'm skeptical of this guy, man. And it's like, it's reminding me, brother, about like how easy it is to comment on some shit, and like how much harder it is to actually like put yourself out there and like, share yourself with the world in an authentic way, right? But I will say, bro, the other thing that I really do value and I've been trying to give out more is like, I really appreciate the genuine comments that someone's comes after me too. And honestly, bro, like somebody's comment being negative on a post for mine, like is not necessarily bad if there's like a grain of truth in it, right? But I think that's the thing that we get wrong in conflict a lot of times, dude. Oftentimes we seek to expect the rest of the world or other people to think the way that we do rather than seeking to understand. And honestly, dude, I think that kind of gets into a place of like, like ego, stuff like that, status challenges, kind of the primal level of things and stuff like that. I mean, and even though I was kind of throwing some shade on Grant Cardone there in the beginning, man, and unfortunately, once you hit the billionaire level, and it seems like he's on a jet a lot, right? You have a greater impact in terms of either pollution or just your voice and people that you might impact that might follow you like you're a prophet, not having the lens of like, dude, this is an imperfect person just like me, just working on themselves, brother. So I'm not here to say that everything Grant Cardone says is negative, dude. I've gotten some value from him in the past, but it just seems to me that as of late, man, he maybe doesn't use, and maybe it's been for a while, I don't know, he doesn't always use his voice intentionally, thinking about the impact that he might have, my man. So yeah, also, dude, the other thing I've been mulling over a lot lately is this concept of social safety net versus sovereignty. I think like the MAGA movement in the US is like very pro big paternalistic government. Big government in the sense that like they're down to make the deficit bigger for like fighter jets and stuff like that. And paternalistic in the sense of like, let's clamp down and make abortion access hard and stuff like that. But like, then they'll hit you with the small government stuff when you talk about like, let's have a United States rail line or something like that, or like, let's have like housing for the homeless or like socialized healthcare. Then they'll be like, small government, small government. But at the same time, dude, like, I'm not really like, into like the idea of like Soviet style socialism. I think like Richard Wolff, like the socialist like economist, I believe that's his name, he would say that like true socialism hasn't been established yet. Like we've only gotten to the stage of like state capitalism. I think something like the Scandinavian system is intriguing, I've been to Finland, Sweden. I think Finland is very nice. It's one of my favorite places that I've ever been to. And I think I heard that they ended homelessness. Feel free to fact check me on that. And I loved riding the public transport everywhere, not having to catch an Uber. Although I know that the people there, when I was there, were complaining about the cost of living there. obviously those people complaining about the cost of living there, if they have some sort of social safety net, they can only go so low in society. Whereas in the US, we might have lower taxes, much higher earning potential, but we have to pay for everything a la carte. And, there's almost seems like no basement to how low you can go in the US. Obviously, the lowest low in the US might still be better than certain very undeveloped countries where like access to potable water is rare, but yeah, dude, like I just like I can't bring myself to hate the entrepreneur or believe that capitalists are necessarily always exploiting the worker. I do believe that is true in, I don't know, some amount of circumstances. Maybe a lot, maybe a little, maybe, I don't know, percentages wise. I think that's definitely true, right? Fidel Castro said capitalists are great users of psychology, right? But at the same time, dude, I don't believe somebody that took the risk and took the gamble to start a small business is necessarily exploiting the working class, dude. It's like, you starting a business, man, it's like you're taking on a lot more responsibility, than the person that comes on for a job, brother, and you should be compensated for that. I think a lot of people are probably talking about like the big, like publicly listed companies and stuff like that, more so. But I think our system in the US definitely needs fixing. I think, as we've seen in the past couple of days, like, Tucker Carlson laid the smackdown on Ted Cruz when he like demonstrated that he didn't know anything about Iran and wanted a regime change there. And he was using support for the state of Israel, like Bible justification for that. And I think he also said, Ted Cruz says in that interview that the communists in Cuba tortured his dad, and then he goes on to say that Baptista tortured his dad. My buddy sent me that clip. Baptista was, if you don't know, the dictator that the Cuban Revolution overthrew. So it is just laughable that someone that's been part of U.S. politics for that long doesn't know much about American history, or global history more so, right? So I do have hope for that, in the fact that, I think that there could be a bipartisan coalition in the U.S. to, not jump into forever wars, right? I've seen some upswell in that, and perhaps that's the first step, right? But being for peace is still very controversial, I'm a small channel, maybe I get 1,200 views on a reel, but I still got hate in my comments for being a dude largely of peace, right? I'm not saying that there's no place for military in the world, right? And even if we don't want to necessarily believe it, there's been I don't want to say we don't want to believe it, but even if you lean on the side of U.S. foreign policy has been whack for a while, it's nah, dude, the U.S. military has done some good around the world at times. Garrett Reppenhagen, who I've talked to a number of times, even though he was, not a fan of his deployment in Iraq, he talks about how he had a really positive peacekeeping mission in Kosovo prior to that, where he helped save some children from human trafficking, guarded a wedding, stuff like that. So I'm not saying that there's, that with a nation as big as the United States, that we should jump into Costa Rica mode and get rid of the military, right? But yeah, man, just some of my thoughts. I would be a fan of like a big, like, rail line throughout the U.S. Imagine if we could take a train all the way to California, dude. I know there's a California Zephyr, but that thing's extremely limited. Like, what if it was easier for the people in LA or the Bay Area to jump on a train and better understand the people of the Southeast and vice versa, dog? Like, I think infrastructure breaks down barriers, and I think we could reduce our carbon footprint too. And also, brother, last thing I'll leave y'all with is, our U.S. military is like a big time polluter, dude. Like, the carbon footprint's pretty crazy, dude. So, perhaps we use the bipartisan angle in the U.S. to say, hey, bro, like, let's stop toppling governments and stuff like that. Like, let's not do this, And maybe you pitch it to the libertarian leading conservative people as a financial matter. And then maybe you pitch it to the people on the left as more of a, hey, bro, like, let's hone in our carbon footprint, right? And we both have the same end game: less pollution, more money in the country, less deficit, right? But we meet people with where they're at in terms of like their vision of the world and like what will resonate with them. You know what I'm saying? I think we got to be creative marketers here, brother. Because honestly, dude, like, I'm not trying to. I don't really want to. Yeah, I don't want a civil war, but all right, dude. That's enough of that. I'm just rambling. I'll let y'all go. I'll catch y'all on the next one.